Human rights group Amnesty International has criticised the British government's decision to exclude the notorious Kincora Boys Home from its inquiry into widespread child abuse in the UK. Now, it has long been alleged that the systematic abuse of children took place in the Belfast home at the hands of a paedophile ring thought to be linked to the intelligence services, namely MI5. It has also been claimed that MI5 blocked police investigations into the abuse, who reportedly used the information of child abuse to blackmail, manipulate and coerce members of the establishment who were committing the abuse. So the question must be asked, if MI5 were involved, then to what extent, if any, were other intelligence services also involved? Is it possible, as suggested on various blogs, that the CIA and Mossad used the care home to blackmail abusers, with orders being dictated from politicians and high-ranking officials in the United Kingdom, the United States and Israel? Is it possible that establishment paedophiles were or still are being controlled by foreign dignitaries? Let's put speculation to one side and examine the facts. If we start at the beginning and work our way forward in time, we will have a much clearer picture of what actually happened at Kincora. Now, the sex abuse scandal came to light in the mainstream media in 1980, when the Irish Independent reported that despite allegations of abuse first surfacing in 1977, which named prominent businessmen, no prosecutions had taken place. The only form of justice that the victims of Kincora have received in 40 years has been the imprisonment of William McGrath, the former head of the home, and two other members of staff, William Semple and Joseph Main, in 1981 for abusing 11 boys. The late Ian Paisley, leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, was accused of being complicit in a cover-up by failing to report his knowledge of McGrath's abuse to the authorities. During the same period, Private Eye magazine reported that high-ranking members of Whitehall and senior officials of the British military were involved in the sexual abuse of boys in Kincora. Although key information about the care home has vanished, which fuels the rumours of a mass cover-up by the Secret Service. One file contained details of a private meeting in February 1982, attended by senior members of the political and legal establishment: Attorney General Michael Havers, Secretary of State Jim Pryor, Lord Chancellor Quentin Hogg, and Sir William Bourne, a barrister and senior civil servant, were among those present at the meeting. Now, according to the memo, Havers learned that the Royal Ulster Constabulary were investigating three separate aspects of the Kincora scandal. The first concerned a man who in 1972 was falsely acquitted on the basis of purged evidence. The file on his case had been destroyed by a bomb. Havers was also told how the man may have withheld information on a murder. The body of 10-year-old Brian McDermott was discovered in a sack in the River Lagan in September 1973. No one was ever convicted of his killing. The meeting was told that information provided conflicted with what the Royal Ulster Constabulary had previously told ministers and officials. A confidential government note in the file said, "It is claimed that influence was brought to bear on the police." It added, "There are persistent rumours that guilty men in high places have not been brought to justice." Also in 1982, local politician Joshua Cardwell committed suicide after being questioned over Kincora. He was a councillor who had chaired the committee responsible for children's homes in the city. So what about the allegation of MI5 involvement? Well, in his 1999 book, The Dirty War, author Martin Dillon claimed that McGrath may have been employed by MI5 since the 1960s and was being blackmailed into providing intelligence on other loyalist groups. This is also substantiated by authors Henry MacDonald and Jim Cusack, And in a 1996 book by ex-BBC journalist Chris Moore, he claimed that McGrath had the abuse covered up and that 2 police probes were obstructed by the British establishment. Also, a former Army press officer, Colin Wallace, who was based in Belfast, has insisted that authorities knew boys were being abused there at least 6 years before they acted. So it appears that there may be truth to the allegation that MI5 were involved. But what about the claim that McGrath had connections to the British establishment? Well, this is easier to prove, and although his friendship with Ian Paisley is well documented, it also appears that McGrath was well connected to other influential figures. Now, I've created this diagram to explain the social circles in which McGrath travelled. As you can see, there are many prominent figures here, and perhaps coincidentally, most have connections to the British intelligence services. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that all the men listed here are paedophiles. The purpose of this is to prove that McGrath was embedded within the British establishment, and as we can clearly see, he was connected to a network that consisted of at least 3 British Prime Ministers. Of course, this diagram illustrates just one of the possible avenues that ties McGrath to the establishment. There will of course be many more other avenues, but as we see here, he operated in the same circles as the likes of Anthony Blunt and Victor Rothschild, who both worked for MI5. Interestingly, the Truth Seeker website reported that one of their informants is a police detective who claims that Anthony Blunt, who allegedly ran a high-level paedophile ring, had managed to block police investigations into the horrendous decades of abuse conducted by Jimmy Savile. But the trail doesn't end there. A book called War of the Windsors has linked Lord Mountbatten, yep, the uncle of Prince Philip, to the Kincora boys' home. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the British government will not include Kincora in their investigation of child abuse. So, what exactly are they afraid of? Why is Kincora a no-go area when the horrific abuse that happened there seemingly involved incredibly powerful and influential figures of the British establishment? The decision to exclude Kincora reeks of denial at best and an attempt to cover up a high-level paedophile network at worst. And I'm not alone with this view. This week, Amnesty International criticised the British government's decision. Patrick Corrigan of Amnesty International said, "The announcement from the government to exclude Kincora from the inquiry is disappointing, but frankly unsurprising. Victims will feel betrayed by this decision, while the public will believe that the conspiracy of silence which has surrounded Kincora for 40 years continues." Despite protestations to the contrary by the Northern Ireland Secretary Theresa Villers, the historic institutional abuse inquiry is simply unable to get at the truth behind the abuse and allegations of security service complicity at Kincora. Only an inquiry with the eyes of Westminster and the UK media, and the ability to secure the necessary powers of compulsion, is equipped to uncover the secrets long hidden at Kincora. In one fell swoop, the UK government has both knocked public confidence in its commitment to reveal the truth of child abuse across the whole country and undermine the Northern Ireland inquiry, which has been given a job for which it is sadly ill-equipped. Now, DUP, UUP, Sinn Féin, SDLP and Alliance politicians have all called for the Belfast case to be part of the Home Office probe chaired by Fiona Woolf. Now, it should also be noted that Fiona Woolf reportedly has links to former Home Secretary Leon Britton, who misplaced not one but 2 dossiers detailing sex abuse allegations involving a notorious high-profile paedophile group. Fiona Woolf is the second person to head the inquiry after Baroness Elizabeth Butler-Sloss stepped down after allegations emerged that her brother, the late Sir Michael Havers, was involved in a government whitewash to protect paedophile Sir Peter Heyman. It should also be noted that Baroness Butler-Sloss led the inquest into the death of Princess Diana, so her establishment connections run deep. Now, of course, even today, 40 years on, still no politicians or members of the establishment have been questioned by police over the abuse at Kincora. And again, at the very least, we see yet more roadblocks by the British government to prevent investigations into a high-level paedophile network, and more often than not actively covering up child abuse. Take a look at this footage from an interview in 1995 with Tim Fortescue, a senior whip in Sir Edward Heath's government between 1970 and 1973.
Anyone with any sense who was in trouble would come to the whips and tell them the truth and say, no, I'm in a jam, can you help? It might be debt, scandal involving small boys, or any kind of scandal which a member seemed likely to be mixed up in. They'd come and ask if we could help. And if we could, we did. And we would do everything we can, because we would store up brownie points. That sounds a pretty nasty reason, but it's one of the reasons. Is if we can get a chap out of trouble, then he'll do as we ask forevermore.
As you can see, we have an establishment that not only allowed the systematic abuse of children, but actually used it for their own political gain. But how far into the upper echelons does this network reach, and who exactly is protecting them? Well, in July 2014, the courageous Peter McKelvey, a retired child protection team manager who had spent more than 20 years compiling evidence of alleged child abuse by people in authority, believes that at least 40 British MPs are complicit in an alleged Westminster paedophile ring. He also claims that some have links with the royal family, who in 2011 conveniently became exempt from public scrutiny as legal reforms made it impossible for members of the public or investigative journalists to obtain vital information about the affairs of the monarchy. And again, we must continue to ask how high-profile members of a nationwide paedophile network, such as Jimmy Savile, Cyril Smith, Rolf House and others, were allowed to become embedded within the establishment, an establishment who not only turned a blind eye but actually facilitated the abuse and now continues to cover up the truth. I'm Mick Meaney, signing off for RINF Alternative News.